We are almost coming to an end, and we have had a day full of learning and networking. Whether you have been to one or several tracks, we truly hope that you've taken something valuable with you from today. With Developer Day, we wanted to focus on you, the developer. We wanted to make sure that you had access to amazing content given to you by experts in their fields. We created an inclusive space for you to connect with other developers because we know that during these virtual times, it isn't as easy. But like I said, we're almost coming to an end. We still have our closing keynote, so don't go away just yet. For this Developer Day, where we focus on developers, we couldn't think of a better person to close this event. This speaker is a person who is a very active member in the developer community. I personally admire her for her knowledge, courage, and for speaking out for women in tech. She's one of my biggest role models. She manages to explain complex topics in a fun and simple way. Today she'll be talking about just that, teaching others, making tech accessible, and the importance of networking and community. I'm honoured to present to you Cassidy Williams.
Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be here with you today at Developer Day. Oh my gosh, it's been such a great event so far, and I'm so excited to be here as your closing keynote. I would like to talk to you about something that is not technical, but it applies to all of us as technical people and people in the tech industry, and that is people-first career momentum. My name is Cassidy Williams. You can find me at Cassidy all over the internet, and I'm a director of developer experience at Netlify. And I haven't always been a director of developer experience at Netlify. I've gone through quite a few changes in my career and worked at quite a few different places. And I'd like to talk to you about that a little bit. And so I've had quite the journey, and it starts back from when I was a wee lass, when I was all the way back in middle school. And when I was in middle school, I didn't know anything about tech. Nobody in my family was in tech. It was truly just something that I thought computers were cool for playing stuff like Roller Coaster Tycoon. And one day when I was walking home from school, I heard a neighbor of mine say, "Hey, you should check out my website." And I was like, "Oh, you can have one of those?" And so I went home and just started looking up, how do I make a website? How can I figure out how to put something on the internet? And it totally blew me away. Oh my gosh, it was my favorite thing. And I mean, you can see where I am today. Obviously, I stuck with it. Now, after that first initial discovery, I started to take classes and learn more about computers as much as I could. In my high school, there weren't a lot of opportunities for me to learn about computers, but we did have an AP computer science class, and we did have some kind of technical teachers where I was able to work with my biology teacher on making a wiki for our biology notes, and working with our track coach to make a website and learn how the inner workings there. And I had so many fun little opportunities there that I really just got to take advantage of some of my resources, even though they weren't the most technical people in the world. And eventually I got connected to an organization called NCWIT, the National Center for Women in IT. And they were just a great scholarship organization that today is huge, helping girls all over the country just get involved in STEM and get involved in technology. And being a part of that group was really, really exciting for me because I hadn't really known any other technical people before. And they were such a good group to get to know. And so when I went to college, I was able to get to know some people there through NCWIT and then get involved in the Women in Science and Engineering organizations there. And I majored in computer science at Iowa State. Now, when I went to my first engineering career fair my freshman year, I was pretty much told by everybody, you're probably not going to get an internship. You're a freshman, you don't really know much, but you can try. And I talked to my college advisor and she was saying, honestly, just apply anyway. You never know what might be able to happen. And so I just started applying anyway, just seeing what might happen. And I think because I didn't expect to get a job, that made me very relaxed while talking to companies, and that was perceived as confidence. And it worked. I got a job. And so my first internship my freshman year was with General Mills, the food company. And that summer was an amazing summer where I got to eat so much food, first of all, but also just kind of learn about how companies worked and get to know the inner workings of their tech stack and stuff and how tech can be applied to food. It was very, very cool. Now, the next summer, I was wanting to go for a more technical company, a more tech-focused company. And I went to the career fair again, started talking to a bunch of different people. I ended up going to the Grace Hopper conference, the Women in Tech conference out in Portland that year. And I got to know so many cool people, and it was really, really awesome. And I was introduced to a recruiter at Microsoft. And that recruiter at Microsoft was able to answer a bunch of my questions, and I was able to get a foot in the door at Microsoft and ended up landing an internship that summer. It was really, really exciting. Now, in that internship at Microsoft, I tried to get to know as many people as possible. I participated in my first hackathon, which was very, very exciting. Fell in love with hackathons after that. And I also got to know a few people who became mentors to me, where I started by just kind of asking them some questions here and there, but then really developing deeper relationships where I got to get to know these people more and then stay connected with them to this day. After that internship, I went into my junior year and I was thinking, okay, I have one internship left. I want to make sure I can get to know as many people as possible. And so once again, I went to the Grace Hopper conference that year. I introduced myself to as many people as possible, and I was still really involved with NC Wit. Now with NC Wit, I was able to kind of just ask lots of questions, get to know that community a lot. And I ended up going with my sister, who's also in software engineering, to the White House. And at the White House, we were able to talk about tech inclusion and bringing more women into the industry and keeping people in the industry who are particularly marginalized and who don't typically have particular opportunities. And it was really, really exciting to be able to do that with her and also to just make such great connections. And a mentor of mine that I have to this day, I met at that event. That summer, I ended up interning at Intuit, the finance company, and it was in the Bay Area, and I was thinking, okay, if I'm going to live in the San Francisco Bay Area, I'm going to get to know as many people as I possibly can. And so I figured out ways to get to as many meetups and hackathons and events as possible. So much so that I probably annoyed people. I didn't have a car, and so I was just kind of bumming rides off of people because Uber and Lyft weren't as much of a thing yet. But it was such a great experience because I really met so many different people. Now, one of the events that I ended up getting to go on, which purely happened because I asked a bunch of people to get to go and it worked out, was a flight. It was a hackathon. It was a flight hackathon, a flight from San Francisco to London. And on that flight, I got to know a bunch of different people, and we ended up having to hack some kind of project on this plane to bridge the gap in STEM. And so I was in the section of the plane that was focused on women in STEM. There were areas for underrepresented and low-income communities. There was all these different categories. And my team was just a really awesome group of people and people who I still stay connected with to this day. And my team ended up winning this hackathon, and we got to present it at a bunch of different events there. And after that summer, we ended up presenting it to the United Nations. Now, after that summer, when I finished my internship, I was into my senior year of college. And in that senior year, I was like, okay, I need to apply to as many jobs as possible. And so I was applying to dozens of jobs, probably over 100 jobs, actually. I'm really just trying to interview a ton and then also still going to hackathons and just trying to get to know as many people as possible. And I ended up presenting at the United Nations with my hackathon team that I mentioned before. And that exact same weekend, I ended up interviewing at a company called Venmo, which I ended up working for after graduation. Now, when I went to Venmo after graduation, I was doing developer advocacy and software engineering. And so I was working on the actual product itself, building some really fun features. Actually, if you block someone in Venmo, I built the first version of that, and it was really, really fun. But then also bringing the Venmo API to a bunch of hackathons and showing people how they could make payments in their apps. And even though I did kind of burn out at times because I was speaking at so many events and meeting so many different people, it was really, really exciting because some of these connections, I was able to forge really great friendships. And it all came from a hackathon or a meetup here and there or a thank you note I might have sent. Now, after Venmo, I ended up switching to a startup called Clarify. It was an artificial intelligence startup. And the way that I actually switched jobs was PayPal had bought Venmo and PayPal had IPO'd, and it became a whole thing where I kind of missed the startup atmosphere and it was getting a little bit too big for me. And so as a result, instead of actually sticking around at the company, I went to this company Clarify. And at Clarify, I was connected by a mentor of mine who I had met at a hackathon before, and I ended up leading the developer advocacy group at Clarify with my sister, actually. She had graduated college and joined me there. I really enjoyed my time at Clarify. It was such a cool company to be a part of, but I wasn't really enjoying living in New York. And so I ended up reaching out to my community and figuring out, okay, who can I work for next? Because I'm moving to Seattle. And I ended up getting connected to a few interesting people who told me where I should be applying and what lists of companies I should be looking at. And I ended up joining this small creative agency called L4. It was a great place to work for. I really loved working at L4, and then it was bought. And because L4 was bought and it was becoming a really big company again, I was thinking, I don't know if I want to stick around. I've got to figure out what I want to do. And some of the people there were really awesome to work with, but a lot of them were leaving. And so my sister, who had gone off to Google and then working at Amazon, she started saying we should work together again. And so she introduced me to someone at Amazon, and I talked with him a little bit more. I figured out what teams might work, and then I went through the full interview process and ended up at Amazon. Amazon was an interesting experience where it wasn't my favorite job to work for, but it was a really solid company to be at, and I really enjoyed working with my sister again. But ultimately, I decided this wasn't really the best fit for me. And so through the power of social networking, I ended up getting a different role at CodePen. CodePen, super small company, it was 8 people at the time, and I was back to just straight up software engineering, helping build the product of CodePen. And it was a really fun time being able to work on this platform that I really loved to play around with. And I was also getting involved in a lot of nonprofits as well, where I had been on the board of a group called Hacker Fund, where at Hacker Fund we would help put together hackathons and projects for kids who wanted to get into tech. And then at this time, I was actually working with a nonprofit called C-Keys, which taught low-income communities and kids how to solder through mechanical keyboards, which is one of my favorite hobbies, but we won't get into that right now. Now, as I was doing all of that, I was realizing I was missing being able to interact with developers a lot more. And when you do a straight-up software engineering role, it's fun. But when you're someone like me, you might want to chat with people a little bit more. And I was speaking at a conference, and I ended up getting connected with this company called React Training, and React Training taught developers full-time, and I thought that sounded awesome. And so I got to talking with them a little bit more and decided, hey, I think I want to do this full-time, and ended up switching over. And boy howdy, traveling full-time and teaching was a blast. I was going all over the world teaching people how to code and work with React, and it was an absolute blast. But you know what happens in a pandemic? You can't travel anymore. And so I had gotten back from a workshop in Ireland back in February 2020 and March 2020, and then everything got shut down. And so I had to reach out to the network and say, hey, everybody, I need a new role because unfortunately we had to lay off all staff. And because I had spoken at a conference recently, one of the speakers at that conference was Sarah Drasner, who ended up being a hiring manager at Netlify, who then interviewed me to be on her team. And I've been here ever since. This was a long story, but you might have noticed throughout this story, the key ingredient in every single move I made, every single job change I had, every single door that I opened had to do with people being around. And it wasn't just people handing me opportunities, but it was people saying, you know what, I met you at this event, or I connected with you at that event, or I chatted with you over coffee that one time, or I got an email from you or saw a tweet. And they were able to help me out. And it was really, really exciting. And when you get to know different people in the tech industry, you really start to build momentum. Your network can grow really, really fast as you get to know a bunch of different people. And so I really want to talk about that career momentum. Now, one of the mentors that I mentioned at one of these events, her name is Kelly Hoey. And she has what's called a career cocktail that she talks about. She has a book called Build Your Dream Network that I highly recommend. And she says, in this career cocktail for career momentum, you need 3 things. You need expertise, a professional objective, and networking and contacts. Now, I don't need to talk to any of you out there about expertise because you're all experts, right? Some of us are, some of us are not. But anyway, there's a few things that you need to do to kind of build up your own expertise. Now, first of all, you need to be able to hone your skills and build your personal brand. You need to know what you're good at and what you're not good at. And so I want to touch on these very specifically. When you're honing your skills, you're kind of refining what you want to work on. And you also want to refine what you want to work on based on what you're good at and what you don't want to do. Now, when you're thinking about what you want to do and what you don't want to do, for someone like me, for example, I know tech-wise, I never want to write C++ again. I did my time. I have no interest. But, I like JavaScript. I'd stick around in the web world for now. I don't know if I want to do TypeScript yet. I'm figuring it out. But I know what I'm good at. I know in a specific role, I really want to be able to have the opportunity to speak with developers because I think that's such a fun time and it's a really fun way for myself to give back to the community. But I know that I don't want to edit my own podcasts. I just don't have any desire to do something like that. I kind of made a list for myself and I wrote it down here and I said, I want you to write this down and I want you to think about how you want to show this publicly to the world. This could be through social media. This could be through blog posts. This could be through a digital garden. This could be however you want. But you want to actually physically write it down for yourself. What do you like to do? What don't you like to do? What are you good at? What are you not good at? Put that list together and then figure out how you want to hone your expertise so that way you can really be intentional with how you want to drive that forward. Now, alongside this is your professional objective. Goals are very difficult to set. If you were to ask me where I want to be in 5 years, I genuinely don't know what I'd tell you. Who knows? I could be retired by then. Wouldn't that be nice? It's hard to think where you want to be in 5 years, but you could think, what are some specific things that I want in 5 years? Do I want to have a certain amount in savings? Do I want to have a certain type of job title? Do I want to be at a certain level of income? Do I want to have a certain type of work-life balance? Do I want to work X number of days a week or X number of hours in a day? Figure out what those goals are and then see, can your current role get you there? Can your current growth trajectory get you there? What can you change in your current role or your current tech stack or in your focus even to get you to those goals? Because if you define those for yourself, just writing them down and thinking, okay, this is what I want, it can really, really help you specify what you need in your brain and how you'll actually take on certain opportunities. Because it's really, really common to be just like, this would be good on my resume. I should do that. But it has nothing to do with what you're honing your expertise on, or if it has nothing to do with your specific goals, it'll just end up being an obligation for you that won't necessarily help you get to where you want to be. And so try to be as intentional as possible with these goals and honing your expertise. And it's kind of tough to do because a lot of people want to say yes to everything. But there's this great quote from Michelle Obama that I love where it's, we need to do a better job of putting ourselves higher on our own to-do lists. We need to figure out how can we prioritize ourselves in a way where we can get ahead in our own careers, in our own growth, in our own lives without just hoping that you're doing right by a specific type of group or a specific type of company. If you stick around at a certain company, for example, just because you don't want to screw them over, but it's doing nothing for you, it's really hard to leave. But at the same time, you don't want to be stagnant in your own career growth. You want to figure out how you can propel yourself forward so you can continue being the best that you can be, or at least content with where you are, and not just being what you think you're expected to be or where your job wants you to be. Now, the last one that I want to talk about is networking. Actually, this is a little bit too small. Networking. I want to talk about this because networking is the absolute most important thing that you can do in your career. I talked about people first. Networking is the last ingredient of this career cocktail, and it is so, so important. The chairman of AT&T, way back in 1908, said, "A telephone without a connection at the other end of the line is not a toy or a scientific instrument. It is one of the most useless things in the world. Since one telephone without any connections is utterly worthless, a telephone network with even 2 users has sufficient value to exceed the inherent value of a single product on its own." And that's the same thing with people, where if you're just doing your own work and you're just getting stuff done, you're useful to your company, you're useful as an individual contributor, or even maybe as a manager or lead. But unless you're actually making those connections with people, you're kind of just staying where you are. But when you make those connections, you can grow exponentially. Your value in the community can increase so much just because you're being a part of it and you're being involved with it. You're not just sitting on the sidelines watching it happen. In this day and age of collaboration and this very peer-driven economy, we have to think of ourselves as something like this telephone. We need to build our connections with each other to sustain ourselves and to sustain our communities. Now, a lot of people think, oh, but I don't want to just like schmooze at cocktail parties. Networking isn't just about passing out business cards at events anymore. We're in a very digital age, and we're in a very remote age specifically right now. And it's so much more than that, and it's so much easier too. Regular daily activities that you do all the time can be really good opportunities for connection. So networking can look like a lot of different things. I have a gigantic list here, and I do want to touch on some of them. I won't touch on every single one of them so we don't run out of time. But something even as small as an email signature can be a great networking tool, because you can say in an email signature, I'm looking for a job, or check out my website, a link to a logo, check out my side project. You can do a lot by just having an email signature that has details about you. A Zoom meetup is very, very typical, especially now because we're not meeting a lot in person. And so when you are meeting people over Zoom and you can get people's emails, you can always follow up and say, hey, it was great meeting you, and just make those connections in your community so that way when you do get to meet them in person, you already have something to start with. Any updates that you might post to the LinkedIns, the Facebooks, the Polyworks, the Twitters of the world, that's networking. When you're meeting with people and chatting on the internet, whenever you make comments on open source, even the way you write your bio can be a form of networking. Joining in an online discussion, for example, you might see the Code Newbie chat that they do every Wednesday where they just post questions and you can respond in those. I've met so many people just by following that hashtag and chatting with people, and I know people who've gotten jobs that way too. Speaking at events, moderating a community, even just writing thank you notes to people goes such a long way. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten to really connect with people just because I wrote them a thank you note after meeting them at an event or they interviewed me for something, because they just appreciate it. It makes these tiny little connections here. And just putting yourself out there somewhere to find your niche, your community. It doesn't have to be a giant community. You don't have to be a gigantic fish in a giant pond. You could be a regular old fish in a regular sized pond. As long as you're getting to know people and finding your people, that's what's key, because you want to be around people who will miss you if you leave, and you want to be around people who can encourage you to grow. When you combine this form of networking, these activities, with the intentionality of your goals, it's so, so powerful. So instead of just mass adding everyone on LinkedIn that you can find, think about how you can specifically connect with people in a given industry so you can kind of refine where you want to be. Try to look for people who are where you want to be. Look at their paths and see how you can try to mimic it, and try to make yourself available for people to mimic you as well. There's a phrase that one of my mentors told me, lift as you climb, where as you kind of climb the career ladder or career jungle gym of success, try to lift people up as you go, because there's always going to be someone who wants to be where you are. And when you move up to the next role or move on to the next thing, someone needs to take your place. Make an opportunity for them. And this isn't something that you just have to do as a junior developer or as someone new in the industry. This is something that I've gotten to do regularly, even in the past year. For example, in this past year, about a year ago, actually, I got to know a person just because I was emailing with someone and they introduced me to someone, and they were an advisor to a few startups. And I knew those existed, but I didn't really understand it. But the more he talked about it, the more I was like, oh, I love the idea of advising startups and getting to know people in this kind of career path. And so he introduced me to a few people. I got to know a few startups, and now I'm an advisor of 2 startups. And that is truly just because I was like, this seems like something I want to do. That person has a job and a life that I think is pretty neat. I'm going to try to pursue that. And it really worked. And even recently, I connected with someone where he has a really awesome newsletter that has so many thousands of developers subscribe to it. And I have my own little newsletter that I send out every week. And I asked him how he goes about finding sponsors and how he connects with people. And it turns out I was undercharging a ton. He makes his own living on his newsletter, and his wasn't that much larger than mine, but it's because he knew exactly how to ask for sponsorships and where to go, and he was able to help me find some. I'm not going to be making a living anytime soon, but it's really, really exciting to be able to do that, and it's all through these networks and being intentional with the specific things that you're looking for. And I mentioned lift as you climb. I love this quote that Jennifer Johnson said. If you want to have a successful career, it's important that you give back to the industry that you're passionate about. As you're giving back to this industry and getting to know things, you don't want to be networking and be just like, what can I get out of everyone? You also want to give back a little bit too. A well-networked person can do so much for other people, where someone can send work your way, offer you a job, even interview you or mock interview you. They can support you in certain ways, acting as a reference or supporting your own startups. They can help you figure out your goals or even ask for a raise. They can encourage you to go a different way. And they can even provide access to certain opportunities that some folks might not originally have access to. Now, you should try to be that person for everyone. Don't just try to take what you can get, but by being active in a community where you can do that, it's so vital for the tech community and any community that you might be a part of to be flourishing and growing and having everyone do well, not just you as individuals or a select few. I love this quote by Danny Trejo. Everything good that has happened to me has happened as a direct result of helping someone else. Everything. And honestly, same. and that's something that I really just want to continue to provide, because people being helpful to me and me being helpful to people has helped my career grow in ways that just wouldn't have happened otherwise. It's truly a game changer and a life changer. Now, I want to end on one final point, and that's be human. Because whenever I give advice like this, folks are very often quick to start DMing me on social platforms, asking me to be their mentor, or they start making demands of people they meet in a given area or event to try and force relationships, trying to check off some list of transactions that will get them somewhere. And humans are not formulas to crack. We're very flawed beings. We can't manage to mentor everyone that comes our way. We can't always learn the fastest. We can't always avoid disappointing people. And internalizing that is very key to effective networking. Personally, I can't tell you how many times I've disappointed people because I wasn't able to meet a schedule they wanted, or I misunderstood how they were feeling about a community situation, or I misspoke, or I didn't act how they expected. And these sorts of things make networking and community building very hard. Harder than any coding problem or security issue or something that technical that you might run into. But recognizing that in yourself and in others will not only make you a better networker, it encourages empathy for the community around you. Relationships take time. They can't be hacked. It's a lot of work, which is very daunting. Don't get me wrong. I know how daunting it seems. But all of these efforts are completely worth it for the sake of yourself and your community and making this industry better for everyone. Thank you so much for your time today. I have had a blast listening to all the talks and being a part of this event. I look forward to chatting with everybody in the chat and getting to chat with all of you on the internet afterwards. I've been Cassidy, and thank you so much for your time.
We have finally come to an end, and we really hope that you enjoyed today. Just before you go, the whole team would like to thank you for joining us, and we would also love to invite you back tomorrow for Developer Labs. Developer Labs is a full day of hands-on labs and tutorials showing you how to integrate Auth into your projects. There will be an introduction to OAuth and OpenID Connect, a workshop on single-page apps with Auth0, how to deploy a custom SPA app with Terraform, a session on DevOps with JFrog, and last but not least, a workshop on advanced API security with Kong. You can find out more information on developer-live. And we hope to see you all there tomorrow. Bye for now.